Good evening. My name is Michelle Holland, and I am Vice President of the Society for Contemporary Art at the Art Institute of Chicago. On behalf of the SCA, I'm thrilled to welcome you to this first public lecture of our fall season, featuring renowned artist Joan Jonas. SCA public programming in 2025, including tonight's lecture, is made possible with generous support from Prada. Since our founding in 1940, the business of the SCA has been to support the museum and the mission of the museum and to engage the community in a dialogue of the art of our time. In the last 86 years, the SCA has acquired more than 200 works for the permanent collection of the museum by artists such as Jackson Pollock, Wayne Thiebaud, Wolfgang Tillmans, Julian Schnabel, and James Turrell. In that time, we've also presented more than 400 artist talks, free and open to the public, this one included. If you've supported us through membership, through contributions, your engagement, or through partnership, we wholeheartedly thank you. And if you're not a member of the SCA yet, or you are interested in enhancing your membership, don't try to read that eye chart. Just scan the QR code, visit the website, or ask me. I'd be happy to talk with you about membership tonight or anytime. Okay, here's a very quick rundown of the SCA's exciting calendar of fall events. I'll try to read fast because I know we all want to hear from Joan Jonas. Please mark your calendars. This is late breaking. Monday, October 13th, sponsors, patrons, and benefactor members have the opportunity to view a special exhibition, Critical Fabulation, curated by artist Simone Lee. Opening this Friday, assistant curator Michaela May will lead the tour and share insights. Don't miss that if you can make it. Thursday, October 23rd, members are invited to a conversation on Joan Mitchell at 100, 6 paintings from 6 decades with Caitlin Haskell, the Gary C. and Francis Comer Senior Curator in Modern Contemporary Art and Director of Ray Johnson Collections and Research at the Art Institute, and Sarah Roberts, Senior Director of Curatorial Affairs, the Joan Mitchell Foundation. Please scan the QR code or go to the website for more information, or ask me. Monday, October 27th, new members are invited to a special evening with a reception and curator-led tours of the contemporary galleries. That'll be fun, so don't miss that. Tuesday, November 11th, patron and benefactor members are invited to a private tour of H.C. Westerman, Anchor Clanker with Giampaolo Giampaolo, Dittmer Associate Curator, followed by a reception. Monday, November 17th, another public program. Artist Jill Milady will give a lecture here at the museum, followed by a member dinner at 3 Dots and a Dash. Please sign up. And last but not least, please mark your calendars for what promises to be a truly special celebration to benefit the SCA, the museum, and the art community at large. Stand by for more information about this exciting event on May 1st. Now, please welcome the SCA Programming Chair, Kate Neiser, who will introduce Joan Jonas.
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening and welcome. I'm honored to introduce Joan Jonas, widely recognized as one of the most influential artists of the time. Born in 1936 in New York City, Jonas is a central figure whose groundbreaking work in video and performance has laid the foundation for new forms of conceptual practice. Her work is in museum collections across the planet, including the Art Institutes, and has been featured in multiple editions of Documenta and biennales from Sao Paulo to Shanghai to Venice, where in 2015, her pavilion for the United States was considered a triumph. Jonas has had major shows at the Tate Modern, Dia Beacon, Haus der Kunst, and most recently, a retrospective at MoMA in 2024. Amongst her many honors, the Guggenheim's Lifetime Achievement Award, the Kyoto Prize, and the Nam June Paik Prize. She is major. Without further ado, please join me in warmly welcoming Joan Jonas.
Thank you, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so glad to be in Chicago. The last time, what I remember, is that it was snowing, and I was in the underground passageways. I don't know what year that was. But That was the last time that I remember. So I'm going to talk while things are showing sometimes and sometimes not. This image, sorry. This is part. Is it moving? Yeah. All right, this is the very first video that I ever made. It was, I think, 68. I'm not sure, though. Anyway, but it was the first, it's a film, and it was my first and one of two films that I've made with filmmakers, and this is called Wind. And it was made, it was inspired by my work with mirrors, and you could see that people have mirror costumes where their costumes with mirrors pasted on them, and that was my first use of mirrors. I was influenced by Borges, the Argentinian writer, whose work was translated a few years before this and made a huge impression on everyone. Borges became one of the most important writers. And so Borges inspired me to work with mirrors. And the mirror has been one of my main props and devices for transformation. These are stills from the mirror performance. Women and men, they both had different roles, but I'm not showing you a lot of slides because I don't want to explain everything. But anyway, this is one of an image from a performance where women held these 5-foot by 18-inch mirrors, and they were heavy. This happens to be not a heavy one. So it made them move, it affected their movements, it made them move very slowly, because to show the audience sees their reflection, and if you move too fast, they don't see the reflection. So they had to move very slowly, which was necessitated by the mirrors, the weight, and their function. One of my main concerns is perception. In my work, I thought from the very beginning to work with how we see the world and how can I affect that in my work. Like if I show this piece with a lot of mirrors and people look at mirrors for 25 minutes moving, it affects the way you see things. So I was interested in that. So the first device was the mirror. And that's a thread that's run throughout my work. The second device, which I worked with, was video. And video also, at the same time, in 1970, I got my first porta-pack in Japan, and immediately began, maybe this is old news to some of you, I know, but I'm still going over it. When the video porta-pack came out, artists bought these were relatively cheap. We couldn't afford the video cameras that they used in production, but we could afford the porta-pack. I think it was about $2,000, which is expensive, but still. And I brought it back from Japan and then started by sitting for months in a studio with the closed-circuit TV set up so that I could see myself in the monitor simultaneously while I performed or while I moved or spoke or did anything. And that was a revolutionary moment for young artists at that time. And this is an excerpt from one of my performances. Drawing has always been part of my work. And in this case, you see, when I got the video and started working with performance, I'd studied art history and sculpture, by the way. When I started working with performance, I brought drawing into it from my past, drawing. I wanted to use drawing, and so the drawing in my work is used in as many different ways as possible. Whenever I have a new piece, I think of another way to make a drawing, another structure for the drawing, and it has something to do with the content of the piece. In this case, dogs were a large part of my content, or the idea of the dog, and in this case, you see me drawing for the monitor and the vertical roll. The vertical roll, I think a lot of you have seen it. I didn't show it because I think it's been seen so many times. I made a piece called Vertical Roll, in which the dysfunction of the TV is the bar going up and down, going down like this, and affecting one's vision of the image that's moving. And now you see that's the vertical roll. And in this case, it's another way that I worked, which is the audience sees simultaneously me working and making the image, and they see how the image is being made for the camera, which you saw pointing down, and then that was passed to this monitor with the vertical roll. And so the vertical roll, that movement also affects the image. And the dog was part of my work because I had a dog, and I incorporate things from around in my life. And dogs are very important to me because they are natural performers. But that's another story. And then these are images from a piece called Organic Honey's Visual Telepathy. And it was my first video performance. And I've explained to you what it is, so that I'm drawing for the camera. There was a camera woman in the piece, and the drawing and the image is passed to the projection and to a monitor, so the audience sees simultaneously two things going on at once. So I was very interested in that double vision at the time. And throughout what I'm showing you, you'll see that sometimes it's a still that I show you, or it's this is an installation, or it's a performance. So those are they are structures. Like, well, a still is a photograph, but still I record my work that way. But I also record performances, and all that material goes into, at some point, an so-called installation. And this is one of that piece, Organic Honey. And I'm showing this because now I can't remember anybody's name. This is an installation I did for, it was in LA, and it was for people in Chicago, actually. Now, sorry, I should have rehearsed this, but I was given, it was a big show made by people from Chicago. And I know you know who they are, but sorry. So this particular installation is very different because they gave me a long, narrow room, like a storefront. And so I made the installation in relation to the idea of a storefront, which is why you see the video, the costume and the image and the other things behind it. You're looking through a window. The other element in my work, or the important element, is the outdoors, the idea of distance. And when I first started working outdoors, I worked with the idea of distance. And distance, I'll let this play while I'm talking. This was on the Lower West Side of Manhattan, and it was a piece called Song Delay. And it was filmed. It was related to my earlier ideas, but in order to make a film of this, I made a performance based on this with a sound delay, with people clapping over the heads and other actions. But when we came to make a film, I had to translate that into the language of film because you couldn't see the details with a video camera. So we had to, and also, this is my favorite part. You see the sound delay in the clapping. And every time we started filming, a boat would go by. So I'm very lucky to have benefited by from all these accidents. Anyway, that was on the Lower West Side of Manhattan. And I'm showing you a few images from another performance that was made for Anthology Film Archives and for their particular situation, with a screen that moved and changed shapes and a monitor on its side, and a very simple set that I built, a table in front of the projection. So this is really about that structure. And also Mirage. It's one piece that I go back to I don't go back to my work, Organic Honey, I never do, but Mirage, there are things about it's very loose and open and abstract, and so I can take elements of that and reuse them. So I know that Jason Moran was here, and so Jason and I started working together in 2004, and the very first thing I made with Jason was a piece called The Shape, the Scent, the Feel of Things for Dia Beacon. It was commissioned by Dia, and I'm showing you some clips from the performance. It was in the Dia space in Beacon.
I have the sensation of being a seismograph, assembled from the wooden pieces of a plant that has been transplanted from the east into the fertile northern German plains, and onto which an Italian branch was grafted.
That was
Let the signs that I receive come out of me, because in this epoch of chaotic decline, even the weakest has the duty to strengthen the will to cosmic order.
This is Jason Moran's music. And in this space, I used moving screens that went sideways and back and forth, because Dia Beacon had these columns, so long column spaces made from the columns. And this particular panel was moved up through the space, and which it shrunk the space. So I'm very interested in dealing with the space, and I was very lucky to have that space at Dia, because you can't work in every space in that way. So I was able to, Jason and I spent 6 weeks during the summer going up there and working on it. I have all the video and the action and the props, and Jason did the music. So the way we worked together was I would show him things, and then he'd play something, and I'd say yes or no. And we went through it like that and slowly built up a soundtrack. And really, I've done quite a bit of work since then with Jason, who is a wonderful person and a great composer. So I won't hit this again. It's another action from The Shape, the Scent, the Feel of Things. By the way, the people who were there was Jose Blondet, who played Warburg, and Ragini Haas. Just to say a few words about Abby Warburg, was a very well-known art historian, much more well-known in Europe than here. And I became interested in him because I was interested in indigenous work from the Southwest. And it's a little controversial because he spent a lot of time there and had photographs, and he was a banker, and he gave up banking to work in the visual arts. He went to the Southwest and became totally involved with indigenous work of the Hopi. And as we all know, you cannot and you don't want to use their work in any way. But he took photographs, which they did not like. And so when I made this piece, I did use the photographs, but there's no reference about where they're from. I don't label them, but I don't use them very much. And then so I don't use any Hopi imagery in the performance. However, it was based on, the reason I was interested was because in the 60s, I went to the Southwest and saw the Hopi snake dance, because I was, one of the elements in my work at the very beginning was the idea of ritual. When I began to make performances, I had never done anything like that before. I was art history and sculpture. And so I began to think of my work as ritual. And I did a lot of research, as I do still, about ritual in other cultures, because I was interested from the very beginning in the work of other cultures. And although you don't see the visual evidence of that, the movement, the slowness, has to do with ritual. And this is a quote from The Shape, the Scent, and the Feel of Things. And I make a big drawing of a snake. So I didn't do a snake dance in any way. It doesn't look like the Hopi snake dance, but it's a reference in that I'd used a snake. And I thought it was all right because snakes are part of every culture. So I'm showing you a section of that. The projection at the far end of the corridor, and you'll see these canvases that are hooked together that made a prop that Ragini is pushing back and forth while I make the drawing. Serpent as weather deity. Serpent in lightning shape. American Pompeii. Form of a house. An irrational animal figure. Animal dance. Dance with live serpents. Plateaus. Masses of limestone. Tertiary rock. Higher plateaus. So these so-called desert scenes are supposed to be the desert. I find places near me, like the beach in Canada that's near my house. All this was filmed at that beach. And these are other images from the performance. The image you see here is based on the idea of melancholia, the most famous, one of the most famous images that Dürer created about melancholia, a major figure in art history. And these are other images. This piece I did, I reconstituted it in different places, once in New York, and then again in Dia Beacon about 2 years ago. And it's my great pleasure to do this piece and to redo it because it's a matter of, in the work, if I do a performance or an installation, I take the elements apart and reconstitute them. So for instance, from a performance, I would take the elements of the performance and reconstitute them, making it more of not a linear, the performance is linear, but the installations are three-dimensional, and you walk around in them and you choose what you want to look at. So these are just from Dia, the last time I set this piece up. And I'd love to do it again. This is a piece called, They Come to Us Without a Word, I think. And it's one of the first pieces I did in collaboration with Ute Mette Bauer and I'm sorry, but that's an image from it. But the reason that crystals are there was because it's supposed to be the winter and snow. And I made a piece in Iceland, and I did a lot of research and exploring of the Icelandic landscape. And I made a piece called Laxidella Saga based on one of the Icelandic sagas. Throughout the work, from the very beginning, I looked at literature and how is literature, what are the forms of literature? So for me, I started out with poetry. My work, when I say poetry, I don't mean precious poetic. I mean the structure of poems. You know, poems have a different structure than prose, as you know. And so I use that, I related to those ideas of poetry in my work, and I still do that. My work is not, it's a narrative, but it's not linear most of the time. And So when I went back to do the second version of an outdoor winter piece, I decided not to go to Iceland, although it was based on an Icelandic writer's work, Halldór Laxness. I decided to go to Norway. A friend of mine had a house that she told me was in the Arctic Circle, and that really drew me to it. I wanted to go north. So you could say that I like to explore landscape. And so I went to Norway, and every morning, it was in the winter, we got up and she gave me her snow. We wore double snowsuits with, boots and everything. It was freezing cold, but it was so incredible. Maybe some of you have been to Lofoten, the Lofoten Islands off the coast of Norway. But this is an image that was shot on a road in the Lofoten Islands. And the singer that who I met while I was working on these Icelandic pieces, Ande Sambe, and he is a singer from the north from the, now I can't remember the name of the people, but the north of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. And I'll remember it before the evening is over. But it's a particular group of people, and they have their own culture and music, and they're very well known in that part of the world. And Ande is singing here. Could you turn it up? Turn the sound up. It's the Sami people. And Ande, I met him in Norway, actually, but he came to New York and we recorded his voice. And he doesn't sing the traditional songs because he didn't think it was correct. So he improvised, and that's him singing. And he's wonderful. Every once in a while he shows up in New York and he dresses like an elf. And he's a Sami, and that's how they dress. That's their traditional costume. They don't dress like that. But it's beautiful, and he was beautiful. And also, that's another example of drawing, because I try to use materials at hand. And so I'm drawing with ink in the snow. So I wanted to find a way to draw in the snow by pouring ink on the snow. And that's what that is. And drawing animals. This is reanimation, I believe. And reanimation began not like this, but I work on how to show a work, the installation. And so for reanimation, I first showed it at the Documenta when Carol and Christoph Bakergev had artists working in little houses outside of the museum. And I chose to do that. And I had a little wooden house, which I chose, and I had videos in all the windows that you could look in the house and see the videos and hear the sound. After that, I decided it didn't work as well as I wanted it to work. So I constructed a situation for indoors using these screens, Soji screens, which when I went to Japan, I've done a lot of work in Japan, and I've made several pieces in Japan with Soji screens because, well, they're beautiful, and also they're a wonderful way to use projection and to make a shape, a sculptural situation. In this case, I wanted the audience to go inside the work and stand in between the screens. So here, this is the 4 screens. There were 4 of them. And it's an overlapping sound. What you see in the distance there is another way of drawing. I draw in many different ways. In this drawing, I pour a little bit of ink on the paper and then put, because of the subject, ice cubes in the ink and move it around with my fingers and make a drawing with ink. Before I push the play button, this is a piece from that. This is a performance from the performance of that same piece. I worked with Jason Moran, and the work we did together was about an hour long, and there are many parts to it. I'm showing you one of my favorite parts, because I love the music that Jason wrote for this. And we use it over and over again, this music. It's wonderful. And so I'll just show you part of that. You'll see. So I'm making drawings as fast as I can, drawings of birds, and throwing them away. And Jason is playing this piece that I use again later. I'll just say something about working with Jason. We've done this, a lot of performances together, and we use the same music. Jason, he doesn't write it down. He has notes, of course, but he doesn't make a score, like a music score, the way Philip Glass would do. He just knows how, he remembers it. And we use the same sound over and over again, but over the years, the way we work together has become it's an exchange. And so I'm responding to his music and he's responding to my movements. And that's how we come together. I won't explain it, but you can imagine. So this piece was a piece I did for the Venice Biennale when I represented America. And I'll just show you images from it. It was 4 different rooms. And actually, I use ghost stories from Cape Breton. There's a Cape Breton magazine. They publish ghost stories that people tell. And I did a lot of research. I wanted to have ghost stories. I did a lot of research, and I decided finally I just wanted everyday language. I didn't want a literary approach to a ghost story. So I used the ghost stories from Cape Breton, told by people from Cape Breton. And everybody up there, when I first go there 50 years ago, everybody believed in ghosts. Not everybody, but most people. And I found that very interesting in relation to all of my interests. So this is just from that performance. I'm just showing you that. It's performing in front of one of my drawings of starfish. And I think this is from the ocean piece, yeah. And I have bells in my hand, and I'm just ringing the bells within this image of the starfish. Because I have worked for a number of years on ideas of the ocean. I was commissioned to do a piece by TBA 21 about the ocean, which is an enormous job. And if you think, how do I start showing something about the ocean? Well, again, research, recording, for instance, the starfish, recording and finding them on the internet. And eventually, I guess in 2016 or 18, I did this piece. I was commissioned to do this piece. Well, those ocean pieces evolved into this piece, which was shown in Venice, in this amazing place that TBA 21, they still have this space in Venice, and they work in it. But I was able to use the entire space and put up my drawings. I made videos. I also wanted to have it kind of sculptural, not kind of. I wanted it to be like my sculpture. And so I made these boxes, or I designed them for the videos. And but I had a reason for that, and that is because in that space, the sound would not work if you showed everything at once. So I had to protect the sound and control the way it was played so that you didn't hear all of it at once. And so you could hear it a little bit, but not completely. And also there are other elements, the drawings. And I made a big glass aquarium. We made it in Venice. The glass was this thick. I'm just saying that because I really enjoy making things. And you don't get a chance to very often, that kind of work. At the same time, I'm a swimmer, and so the people, TBA 21, they also invited me to go to Jamaica. And so some of this work is shot in Jamaica, and swimming underwater. And the water is part of the piece, the ocean.
The mind evolved in the sea. Water made it possible. All early stages took place in water. The origin of life, the birth of animals, the evolution of nervous systems, the appearances of complex bodies that made brains worth having.
That's Zora Quesabir. I like to give her people credit. And I began to work with children a few years before this was shot, and they were all children of friends of mine, I must say. So I didn't have to go out and put an ad in the paper. Zora's mother is an artist, and she's in a number of the pieces at that time. Now she wants to be an actress, so she's somewhere in the West Coast. I haven't seen her in a while. These are other shots of the installation. So people could walk into these boxes. There were also mirrors that I had made in Murano, because I wanted to have mirrors that were ripply, the effect of ripples. And oddly enough, Murano didn't know how to do that. And so I had an ex-student tell them how to do it, my ex-student from Philadelphia, actually. And the way you do it is you put the glass sheet on the table and you roll something over it, but it's a very special, so they learned how to do it, and they did it in Murano. This image, again, these are the children that were in that piece, and in several pieces in a row. And they're performing here. The background is a list of fish. So the piece is a lot about fish. I made hundreds of fish drawings.
Spearfish, swordfish,
Herring,
Trout.
dogfish,
goldfish, lionfish,
butterfly fish,
mud skipper,
garden eel,
pink, squid,
viperfish,
Octopus.
frogfish,
scorpionfish, dolphin,
skate,
sturgeon,
carp, halibut,
sole,
Angler.
sardine,
anchovy, cod,
halibut,
lobster,
perch,
manta ray, butterfish,
pilotfish,
Jellyfish.
seahorse,
stingray, guppy,
salmon,
glass eel,
discus fish.
grouper, albacore.
So two of those children are Jason's two boys. They're twins. They're now 17. And one of them I just had, I'm working on this piece with David Gruber, who's a marine biologist, about whales. And we've made one version. I think we're going to make another one. And so one of Jason's son is a dancer. The other one wants to be a pilot. They're twins. And so I continue to work with some of these children when they're around. Children are always very busy, as you know. More shots of the installation. And this is another section of the video in the performance.
Two marine biologists published a study of giant manta rays responding to their reflection in a large mirror installed in their aquarium in the Bahamas. The two captive rays circled in front of the mirror, blew bubbles, and performed unusual body movements as if checking their reflection. They made no obvious attempt to interact socially with their reflection, suggesting that they did not mistake what they saw as other rays.
So this was the second time I worked with these children. The first time, I didn't ask them to speak. And then when they came back and they were a little bit older, I have to give them more to do. So I have them speak the lines, which is great, I have to say. Have the children do that. And again, I'm showing you some of the videos that are in these boxes. So this is, again, a video that was in one of the boxes, and it was made, so that's, anyway, who they are, yeah, is a good question. There's three of the children, and it was filmed partly in Cape Breton, the background, and the children, I would record them separately and then superimpose them on the background. And at the same time, I began to work with the marine biologist David Gruber. And we met through TBA 21, who produced this piece, who used to have, they had convenings of different people. So I met David Gruber at one of these convenings, and I learned that he was developing cameras and lenses for shooting underwater. He's a marine biologist. And he wanted to record how fish see. That immediately attracted me, that the idea of perception. How do fish perceive? And a lot of this work is about how fish perceive, and also what I'm much more into is how animals perceive. Part of this work also, they're octopi. You know, I've visited aquariums where the octopus is behind. I could visit behind the scenes. In Mystic, I went with David. We went behind the scenes to see the octopus. And the octopus, there's always one person taking care of the octopus, but they're very friendly. And I read, one of the major books that I read for this piece was called The Soul of an Octopus by Cy Montgomery, which is beautiful. It's about, the octopus was in the Boston aquarium, and she visited it many times and talked about it and described what it was like to be held by the, you put your arms in and the octopus grabs your arms. So that's part of making this work. I didn't do that. No, I did put my arms in, but they didn't grab me. But part of the interest that I have in my work is the research. And I really enjoy, this one I really enjoyed, finding out about fish in the ocean. Of course, I did the others too, but this is the most recent. So David, the way we worked together was, we talked a lot, of course, and he gave me footage, because films a lot of underwater footage. He gave me footage, but what he realized after he left his hard drive at my house one night was I just downloaded everything from his hard drive. And then it was okay with him. All right, now I'm showing you this because it's a complete piece, and I like to show something that has a beginning and an end and a middle, although it's not independent. It's part of this ocean piece. It's part of the whole situation, but I'm showing it to you because I want you to see the relation of the wind. Is it going? Yeah. And Jason's music again. You could see the wind is my friend. Whenever when it's windy out, sometimes if I'm in Canada, not in New York, I rush out with my flags and my costumes, and the wind helps me along, to say the least. So I'm not sure what is this next. Oh, I'm not going to show you that. I'm just going to mention it, that I've worked with a dancer, Eiko Otaki. If she ever comes, please go to see her work. I'm not showing it because it's too much, but we did two improvisations together, 2 works, and for me, it was in my old age, I'm much more open to collaboration than I was when I was much younger. I mean, I always worked with other people, but not in a completely open, collaborative way. But now I'm changing. I'm just wanting to mention Eiko. So this is the last piece I did. Some of you saw it in New York. And again, Jason, and I asked Jason to play. What I just showed you was I asked Jason to come and play in the piece, and it's one of the new works. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but this is it. This is Jason playing. But I would like to just use his sound. I don't know how, but I'm trying to show you what I'm thinking of, the latest things I've been thinking about. So it took us like a day to move this piano into that space. But what you see in the wall behind Jason is these drawings that I make. I make a drawing and then I crinkle the paper up, a special Japanese paper. I use a lot of paper, and that's what the wall is covered with, these drawings of trees. So it seems like the time went by so quickly, but we're going to have questions. But before we finish, I was just been in Iceland, and I'll explain what you're going to see. I've worked a lot with the Icelandic writer Halldór Laxness. In fact, some of the work you saw was his text, Under the Glacier. And of course, I was in Iceland for Volcano Saga, which I made in, 20 years ago, based on an Icelandic saga, because I was also following the way literature develops. So the very first, the very early poetry, but then all the forms of literature, the Icelandic saga, Grimm brothers fairy tales. Well, I consider the sagas more advanced than the Grimm brothers. The Grimm brothers are very, simple black and white, although a lot of color, characters. They're cardboard characters. But the sagas, they're much more three-dimensional and more, I don't know if you know this, but in Iceland, even the old sagas, the Icelanders know the characters. They know the names of all the characters, and they relate to them like they live down the road. Like there was a guy named Capitain in one of the Laxdæla saga, and I mentioned the name, said, oh yeah, he lived down the road over there. And I found that really kind of fascinating. And then, so I worked on the Icelandic saga, and then, I don't know how many years ago, at the Venice Biennale, not that long ago, Ragnar Kjartansson had the pavilion, the Icelandic pavilion, and I met him then. I went to see him. He was painting portraits all day long, and I liked that. I liked the way he worked, the way he did that, and so we became friends. But I can't remember. There was a reason. Yeah. So Under the Glacier, which I've shown many times, there's a character, a renegade priest is a character. And that happens to be Ragnar's great-grandfather, which was, amazing, right? But that's the way things are in Iceland. They're all related to each other. So Ragnar and I got Ragnar. I asked Ragnar to be in my piece because I hadn't made it yet, and he told me it was the way Icelanders talk. I thought he said no, but he said yes. But it's just the way the Icelanders express themselves. So I didn't know that he would say yes, but I found out, and then I said, "Well, you owe me one." So of course he said yes, and so I had this idea to do a piece with him reading or doing something, performing. And they invited me to Iceland this last month or two ago, and I went there. They invited me because it was Haldor Laxness's birthday or something, and they had a celebration. And they only asked me for that reason. They're friends, and so it was nice that they asked me. So I thought, this is my chance to work with Ragnar. And so I took all the text that his great-grandfather spoke in the book, and we put it on paper and so on, so that he could read it, because there wasn't time to go beyond a reading. But of course, Ragnar, he said, what shall I wear? I said, lots of different things. So Ragnar, wears different suits that he had. They're not exotic or anything. But, and it was filmed, coincidentally. When I got to Iceland, the first place we went was Haldor Laxness's house outside of Reykjavik, which is beautiful. He built it really for himself. And so I filmed Ragnar. No, I said to them, they said, what do you need? And I said, a good cameraman and a sound person. They got it. And I have to say, this is a real collaboration, because we shot it. I said to them when it was over, well, what do I owe you? Nothing. So they gave it was a real collaboration. The cameraman, the sound man, and the sound man turned out to be an editor. So we took all the footage and edited it himself without me being there. And so I'm showing you, because I mentioned it to some people, and everybody wants to see it because of Ragnar. So I'll show you part of it now, so we could look at it now. Icelandic composer.
It's a pity we don't whistle at one another like birds. Words are misleading. I am always trying to forget words. That is why I contemplate the lilies of the field, but in particular the glacier. If one looks at the glacier for long enough, words cease to have any meaning on God's earth. I once had a dog that was stray for so long that I had forgotten his name. He didn't respond when I called him. When I barked, he came to me. Right enough. But he didn't know me. I am like that little dog. Sometimes I feel it's too early to use words until the world has been created. I thought the creation was still going on. Have you heard that it's been completed? You must not think that I'm asking a bishop representative to be silent. I merely think that words, and the creation are two different things. Two incompatible things. I don't see how the creation can be turned into words, let alone letters, hardly even a fiction. History is always entirely different to what has happened. The facts are all fled from you before you start the story. History is simply a fact on its own. And the closer you try to approach the facts through history, the deeper you sink into fiction. The greater the care to which you explain a fact, the more nonsensical a fable you fish out of chaos. The same applies to the history of the world. The difference between a novelist and a historian is this: that the former tells the lies deliberately and for the fun of it. The historian tells lies. In his simplicity, and imagines he's telling the truth. Everything that is subject to the laws of fable is a fable.
It's a very well-known pianist, Icelandic pianist. I have to say his name.
Pastor Jones thinks that time is the one thing we can all agree to call supernatural. It is at least neither energy nor matter, not dimension either, or let alone function. And yet it is the beginning and the end of the creation of the world.
I thought that's a good place to end the lecture, but we have questions now if you'd like to ask questions. Please,
Thanks.
questions.
We do have time for some questions. I'm just going to help translate them here, but we do have microphones going around. So if you want to ask a question, raise your hand, and a microphone will come to you.
I know it's hard to ask questions.
Hi, thank you. You've presented this stupendous body of work that seemed almost effortless, but I know you must have faced serious obstacles in your career, and I wonder if you would speak to how you overcame some of them.
How I dealt with obstacles.
Yeah, obstacles you overcame in your career.
Push on. I don't know what to, it's hard to answer that because probably, yeah, it's not easy, and it's hard. And also sleepless nights, oh my God, a problem. You know, I lie awake at night, and then you have a problem-solving thing in your brain, that there's something that you're stuck with, you can't get rid of it, it's in your brain. And a lot of times I could solve it that way. It would come to me at night or whatever, in an odd moment, and you never know when ideas are going to come with you. And yeah, I don't know how to answer that. It's definitely sometimes torture, but the pleasure comes when you find a solution. And what I loved was to see the final thing. And I work with other people and with editors. I always had a very good editor. So all the performances are edited. Everything you saw tonight has been edited. It's not just raw. Anyway, I don't know if that answers and helps.
You were speaking about how you changed your mode of collaboration with people. And I'm curious how sort of the rewards of being more open in your collaborations with others, how that's been developing for you.
The rewards of being more open in your collaboration.
It's just more relaxing. It's hard to explain. I never have talked about that in public because it's just sort of working with Eiko. I just decided to, with her, we met, she's a dancer, I'm sure some of you have heard of her. She's wonderful. She and Eiko and Coma performed for years together in New York, and I never went to see their work. But I knew about her, and I was always interested in what she was doing. She's beautiful, a beautiful dancer. And so we finally met. Douglas Crimp introduced us a few years ago, and right away, I invited her to come to Canada, where, often I do a lot of work up there. So she came up and stayed with me for 4 days, and we began just to work together. And the thing about working with Eiko was I had the camera, and she was the performer, because she was the dancer. And that's how we began. But, and then, for instance, Ragnar, this is not a piece, but I like the idea that I was able to just let go and have their generosity, to share their generosity. And I can't explain it. It's hard to answer that question. Probably the next piece I won't collaborate. I don't know. But I don't know if there will be a next piece. I don't know. I don't know the future. None of us do. And I think we're living in a very difficult moment. And I think it's very important to be open to each other, to be together, to do our work, and not give up.
There's one more question up here.
Hi, thank you so much for this really rich presentation. It was really beautiful to see how you really pushed on in your work, how your work expanded and developed. I have one question. At one moment in the talk, you talked about so-called installation. You're currently widely discussed as a pioneer for video and performance art, etc. How would you position your work in relation to installation art and its history?
How would you position your work in relation to installation and its history?
First of all, let's just say what does installation means? It means arranging things in a space, right? So it's a very general term which means nothing. In a way, because it doesn't really explain what it is. So for me, installation means I take the elements and I arrange them in a certain way, the sound, the vision, the visual, the objects, and I make a situation that to me is as important as a performance. In the performance, the audience is sitting like you, passively, not passively, but they're sitting and they're looking at something happening in front of them like this. In an installation, you move in the installation. So for me, it's a form. An installation is a form of work. And I'm sure many people feel that way. That's what it's become. It wasn't that way when I first began to do this kind of work. But you know, when I began working with that idea, although I didn't call it installation, in my early performances, in order to do a performance, I had to make a space for myself. Like maybe it would be up here, and that would be my space that I would work in, not in a stage, that I would work in which I would invent and use the space. Space is one of my main materials, the idea of space and what you can do with it, how you can change it, how you can occupy it, how you can preserve it, and so on. So whenever I was going to do a performance, I'd have to make a space in my loft or wherever I was going to work and work in that space. And then that became the installation. And I would show, if I showed it, that would be part of it, that first step, as a way to make a space for myself. In a way, it's a space for myself, but it's not. It's a space for the audience, for the people. And they move through it in a very different way. You know, they can look at two things at once. They can, they can hear the sound behind them, and so on. I don't know if that answers your question.
Do you have any advice for young artists that's in their early stage career and when they're not so confident about what the direction they're doing and what the material they're using or the concept, do you have any advice?
Advice for young artists, especially when they're not so confident.
I have to say that I was terrified as a young artist. I'd go to a party and stand against the wall and not be able to speak to anyone. I felt I had no confidence. I mean, I did have confidence. I believed in myself, but I didn't know how to be in public. And so I was thinking about that before giving this talk, the idea of stage fright. I had stage fright for years, and so did many of my friends, that worked in theater. Stage fright is just part of it, I guess you could say. But stage fright is also for young artists who are about to do a show. It's always challenging, always difficult. But what I say to young artists is, love what you do. It's the most important thing, because you may not be recognized. You know what I mean? You may not have recognition. On the other hand, love what you do and have a peer group, other people around you that you can talk to about your work. That's what you have to do. And I think that, the center used to be all in New York and London and, other cities. now it's scattered all over the world, the kind of work that we do. It's done in China, as you know, in Japan, and that's exciting that that happens. And I think it's important. There are little groups all over the world, peer groups. So it's very important that you have other people to talk to and that you can figure out your ideas that way.
Even in Chicago.
I
think
I'm
we'll
sorry.
do one more. I think we'll do
I didn't
one.
mention Chicago, I'm sorry.
I think we'll do one. This is going to be our last question, I think so.
Thank you so much, Joan. I'm over here. Sorry. Hi. I just wanted to ask you, one of the first things you were talking about with this first piece that's still up on the screen, is you mentioned mirrors as a tool for transformation. And I just wanted to hear a little bit more about what transformation means to you and what your intention was of what you wanted to transform.
Well, at that time, I don't think of it that way anymore, but I was interested in how people see, how they perceive a space, and I wanted to alter the way they, I don't know if I did, but I wanted to alter the way they see. The way I was altered by seeing mirrors, you know, if you watch mirrors moving around a space, you don't see things the same way, exactly. You do, but it alters the way you perceive the space. And so my tools for that were the mirror, and then the video, and finally the outdoor distance. And so I worked with those ideas for many years, and those concepts. Sorry, what was the question?
What transformation means to you?
Yeah, well, transformation means, as somebody who's making something, you transform a space like the mirrors. How do you use them? You transform, you don't use them, in my case, the way they're supposed to be used, although they do reflect. You use the reflection, but you use them in different ways, like in a performance. And I think that's what, to me, transformance is. With the last two pieces you showed, the wind, for instance, is a big transformer. You know, blows everything, and everything is moving, and it's violent, or it's quiet. All those things come into the work.
Thank you so much, Joan.